My name's Jake. I wanted to tell you, make this message, because if anything happens to me and any of my friends, somebody needs to know what's going on. I can't tell you where I live or my last name. You just have to trust me that what I'm talking about is real. This is a real place, a real town. It may even be your town.
Welcome to Thoughtspeak, a podcast dedicated to the weekly discussion of K. Applegate's 1996 book series, Animorphs. My name's Coleman.
And my name's Mitchell.
This episode, we are getting into the third book, The Encounter, but we'll save that for a little bit later. Right now, I just wanted to ask you, Mitchell, how you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Yeah?
Definitely. Even more so after reading a good book.
Hey, spoilers. You are constantly trying to spoil your review at the beginning of each show.
No, it's called foreshadowing. I'm foreshadowing.
It's not foreshadowing.
It's foreshadowing by saying I read a good book. Let's leave it at that.
Your foreshadowing aside, I want to take a moment real quick here at the beginning of the show and thank everybody who's downloaded the episodes and subscribed so far. We've gotten a lot more than we expected. We were hoping for, but we definitely got what was coming to us. No.
We got hundreds more than what I was expecting.
Yeah, it was really cool to see that people were interested in this. I knew those Animorph fans were out there. I just didn't know how to dig them up. So I guess a podcast will do that. And yeah, thanks also to everyone who gave us ratings on iTunes and Stitcher. I think we've got like 5-star ratings on iTunes alone, and a couple.
Yeah, very important.
Yeah, and that's great for just getting the show out there and getting it in front of more people who might not otherwise have searched for an Animorphs podcast. So more reviews, the better, just so that we can spread the love of the show and get more people sitting down where you are right now. It's definitely pushing us into feeling like we're doing something that you're enjoying and that we can put out each week and you'll have a good time with it.
All right,
so I did want to bring up a couple things here before we get into our discussion and review and tearing apart this book from the ground up. In the last couple of years, there's been some interesting news on Animorphs, and since there aren't any other podcasts devoted to Animorphs around to give you your news bits, I guess we're going to have to fill that slot.
Hopefully.
Yeah, so first off, on December 11th, 2012, about 2 years ago, people saw that Sony Pictures had registered 4 domain addresses that may or may not allude to their involvement in an Animorphs movie. Those ones were specifically Animorphs.net, Animorphs-movie.net, Animorphsmovie.com, Animorphs-movie.com. And I don't know if that means they were just covering their bases in case they ever wanted to do one, or...
You know what? If I could be so bold as to make a prediction, because this actually ties into another thing that I wanted to mention. The book reprints. I think they were obviously reprinting the series to gauge interest in, more Animorphs properties, maybe a sequel, or maybe this movie. And actually, something that I wanted to point out was that thus far, they have reprinted up to book 8, I believe. And there are not currently any plans to continue with the reprints. So that could be a potential red flag, I guess, that maybe the Animorphs reboot idea lost some steam here if these reprints aren't selling as well as they had thought they would.
Well, like I told you the other day, I was a little disappointed that they haven't really been pushing a really hard strategy for marketing these reprints. I've bought a few of them now, and they're perfectly fine reprints, and some of the things they've done to the canon is excellent. I mean, it fixes some things, it updates some things that are fine and don't affect the classic narrative at all. But I haven't seen any advertisements or any big pushes other than that terrible, terrible book trailer they put out.
Wait, book trailer?
Yeah, did you not see that?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, they you can find it on Animorphs.net or .com or Scholastic.animorphs.bookseries
YouTube. YouTubing it.
Yeah, they made a book trailer and it's pretty wacky. But Yeah, so I mean they haven't done just I don't think they've done the series justice. They didn't go full force into promoting these reprints, and I think that might have hurt it a little bit.
Well, yeah, but I would have to say I don't really blame them for that. I mean, it is a fairly old property. I don't think that's necessarily where their marketing team's at.
I
at
guess,
the moment.
but look at Ender's Game and book series like that. Those are much older than Animorphs, and they've been able to do a big revival for that.
That is true, but in the case of Ender's Game, at least, there was a ginormous fan base and following for that, as well as the new movie coming out. I think definitely did it. But yeah, I guess if Sony Pictures did want to put out an Animorphs movie, that probably would spur on the reprint revival effort.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm just a lowly podcaster as far as you guys are concerned, listening to this right now. But I feel like if they were making these reprints to try to see or gauge interest in a possible sequel series or a movie or whatever, I think if they had just gotten Kay Applegate, who, she said in her AMA and a couple interviews that she's completely interested in writing more Animorphs. If they had just gone ahead and gotten Kay Applegate to write book number 65, I think that would have been all the promotion they needed. So many people would have been so excited to see where this series goes next that word of mouth would have promoted itself, at least for a certain bracket and generation.
And I think that where at least, Hollywood is concerned, I think they're mostly thinking about, reboot. And I don't think reprinting the entire run of the book series really is going to have a lot to do with that. But I think as an older reader now, I would prefer to, instead of reprinting, the single books, book 1, book 2, all the way up, what I would have liked to see is more of a anthology kind of collection. If they had done, books 1 through 10 in a huge book, that's what I'd be more interested in collecting than re-buying all, 60-some books in the series. I
would have bought that in a heartbeat. I mean, even if it was like 1 through 19 or something. Something crazy like that, and it was $50 hardcover with all the Animorphs just changing on the front cover with holograms. I would have picked that up immediately.
The Animorphs tome.
Oh yeah, the saga. But no, that's interesting. They registered these domain names. Nothing's come of it yet. Obviously, we're 2 years out from when that happened. But it's news, I guess.
If anybody from Scholastic is listening to this right now, stop the individual reprints. Focus on a bigger collection of the series. That's what us older fans would likely want.
Or again, like I said, not to reiterate too much, but put out book 65. If you had a new Animorphs book that sold out, got on the New York Times bestseller list, Hollywood, with their huge, turn on for young adult novels being turned into movies right now, if they would see that, they would immediately option that or get some scripts written or something. But Haley Joel Osment as Jake, or something, I don't know. I'm saying they would make it happen. I mean, that's all you need for a young adult book. Everyone's looking for the new young adult book series. Why not take the old one that's already good?
That could work.
So the other bit of news, a little more recent than that, and I'm mostly talking about mainstream, pop culture news, not just all the great forums and people.
I'm hip.
Yeah,
I know. I get my news from MTV.
MTVnews.com. No, this actually comes from Entertainment Weekly. It's published on November 14th, 2013. And it was basically, they have a segment called Adapt This, where they just, using their huge audience, they pitch an adaptation of a famous book series, or they have some kind of rules set up for which ones they choose or what they have to fall under to be able to get into this category. But they basically pitched a new Animorphs series, and they reference the TV show, and they talk about its mistakes and its failings and stuff, and they talk about how you could do it, either as a mid-priced TV show or as a full-on movie series again. And it's just, I don't know, I found it really interesting that Entertainment Weekly has, I guess, at least one big Animorphs fan who was just dying to see some new content and some new adaptations.
It was me. I'll admit.
Ghost written it. Ghost wrote it.
I wish.
Yeah. So those are the only two things in the last I don't know, couple of years, I guess. Any kind of new news on as far as like adapting Animorphs. I'm sure there was tons of news back in the day.
Yeah, and other than hearing about the reprints not doing so well, that's the last bit of info I have as well.
Yeah. So
buy the reprints, I guess.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking about buying all 8 of the reprints. It wouldn't do anything really. I've already got 3 of them, but just show a little support for the series.
Not unless every single Animorphs fan came together, bought all 8 of the reprints, took pictures of all 8 of their reprints that they just purchased, and then sent those photos to Sony Pictures.
Yeah.
I think that's what they want to see.
Or even better, a competitor studio.
Or I guess maybe just one person could buy all 8, take a picture from several angles, and then everyone can send different pictures.
No, we need to get those free ebook versions that people have made of Animorphs. Get those on torrenting sites, because everybody knows the studios watch and see what's torrented the most nowadays. They release lists like every month. So get the free Animorphs ebooks torrenting on all these sites. Everybody start downloading them, and then we'll raise interest at the Hollywood level.
That could work. It just might be crazy enough to work.
Maybe. I think everybody should subscribe to I don't know, if there's any Animorphs podcasts out there, I guess if a ton of people started subscribing to one, that would send a message. A powerful message.
I'm willing to bet an Animorphs podcast with a dedicated fan following, that'll surely tip the scales in the Animorphs' favor.
We'll have like a, 1,000-man/woman march on Sony Pictures lot.
No, even better. Let's do a 1,000 animal march.
Yeah, let's get a bunch of endangered species and just release them on the Sony Pictures backlot.
There's been crazier plans to save, shows and properties and stuff.
Yeah. So anyway, that's our. I'm not going to say that this is going to be a recurring news segment because I don't think, unfortunately, there's not enough news to go around every week. But
we can make up news, but that won't help anything.
I heard that Kay Applegate is she's becoming a dog groomer.
That is probably the worst piece of made-up news that anybody could have made up. Well, man, I'm excited to talk about book 3. What do you think?
Yeah, let's go ahead and jump in.
Help! 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 Wait! Help! 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 Wait! Stop! Their bodies were now hosts, harboring an alien form of life, a cosmic form, which to survive must take over every human man. So I ran. They're after you! They're after all of us! Our wives, our children, everyone! They're here already! You're next! You're next! You're next! You're next! You're next!
Okay, so book 3, The Encounter. We're getting through them now. We're already to the 3rd book out of 65 or 66 if we want to do Alternamorphs.
Alternamorphs? I don't know.
No, book 3 is a big one. It was definitely one I was looking forward to. Everything I can remember about it before I had done my reread is I have nothing but good things to say about it.
Yeah, I strangely didn't remember a whole lot of it. But the parts that I rediscovered were
good.
If only I had your suaveness. Yeah, I didn't remember a whole lot from the encounter, but upon rereading it, I discovered that this is definitely one of the good Animorphs books. I can firmly say.
Before I read this back of the book summary, you had one note about the beginning of the book that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, well, I just think it's cool that right before chapter 1, there's a little page that just says the author wishes to thank the Raptor Center at the University of Minnesota. And for anyone who didn't know, which I'm sure is probably everybody, I live in Minnesota. So
I actually revealed our locations on Reddit when I was talking to some people who were talking about the first episode, I told them that I was from Texas, and
you are the worst Animorph ever. just any old random Redditor. Did you hand over your social security number?
Was I not supposed to? How else are they gonna find me on Twitter? And to reiterate, I'm not from Texas. I live in Texas currently, but I'm from West Virginia.
Well, I am from Minnesota. I live in Minnesota, and the author clearly got all of her information about hawks from where else? Minnesota.
No, that is cool that she took that much time. Because, I mean, I'm sure she did a lot of animal research throughout the series, but it seems like she went the extra mile to really nail Tobias.
Yeah, well, this is why I'm so excited, is because Tobias is such a different character from everybody else, being trapped in the body of a hawk. And I think almost every reader, upon finishing that first book and realizing one of the characters is now a bird, kind of, had that moment where they thought, well, how's that going to work for the rest of the series with one of the main characters as a bird? Really?
Yeah, and I don't remember it. I don't remember it initially, but it must have been cool to get to that, even the second book, and then especially the third, to be like, I don't think he's changing back, guys.
Yeah, there's still maybe a moment of doubt where, it's you're kind of wondering, really? He's a bird for the rest of the series? Yes, he is. Let's read a book about it now. And that's why I think this definitely sets this book apart, and most of Tobias's books as well, just because they're from this different perspective.
I would go as far as to say that this particular book influences a lot of the books down the road where we go down weird paths, like into the minds of Yeerks or other alien species, or just getting different insights. And then just the main reason these books were written, to get into the mind of animals. So this is definitely an important book, I would assume, to K. Applegate in writing them. So let me read the back to warn, or I don't know, reveal to everyone. This is the last reprint I have. So this is from the new reprints. So there's a couple small differences, a couple changes within the book, just to update it for our modern, fast-paced world. But I'll go ahead and jump right into the summary. When Tobias and his friends were given the power to morph, they were also given an important warning: never stay in a morph for more than 2 hours. But Tobias broke the time limit, and now he's trapped in the body of a hawk, forever. Tobias won't give up, though. They all made a promise to fight, so when he discovers an important Yeerk secret, he knows he has to do everything in his power to destroy it. But to do so, Tobias will have to contend with a part of himself that's wrestling for control, a part that isn't human.
Huh. Yeah, that is quite a bit different, actually, than the original. It goes a bit more into what the book is actually about, whereas in the original, it's kind of a generic description, really, of the broader series, I guess. On Nickelodeon!
Check out Shawn Ashmore this week on Animorphs, the TV show. Okay, well, yeah, you wanna lead us into the main body, the main storyline?
I would love to, and like all Animorphs books before it, and surely those to come after, there is a nice couple of chapters here that just sort of recap, who our characters are, what they're doing, why they are currently birds.
Now, actually, this comes to my first note, which I actually marked the first page of this book, because I have an important note about it. And the note I wrote down was, "My name is Depression." Like, it's already right in his intro to "My name is Tobias," the same intro that everybody else does. It's already, like, crazy sad. Like, he's already, like, feeling sorry for himself, and, like, in his intro to who he is.
Well, it has kind of become his defining characteristic at this moment is, he's the depressing Animorph, because he's the one that they just see as a constant warning.
Yeah, well, I just, right out of the gate, they were ready for it. So, and then after that, after his, introduction, we go into this crazy deal and Dan section.
So our opening, or recap, for this book starts with Tobias and Rachel deciding that they are going to ruin this car dealership commercial taping.
Yeah. He's just basically, Tobias is hanging out over top this dealership as they're about to shoot a commercial, and then he just dives and goes for the bird cage, which houses another red-tailed hawk, caged by Dealin' Dan, the owner of the car dealership, who's just using it to be basically a mascot for his crappy little car dealership.
It's his marketing campaign, I guess.
Yeah, so Tobias in hawk form is going to attack these 3 people just in the middle of this car dealership, and we find out a few minutes later that Rachel is also part of the plan. She just missed her bus or something.
I guess. Well, maybe she was just waiting to surprise everybody. I think more surprising is the fact that Tobias and Rachel are working together on this little side project without anybody else's consent or permission.
Yeah, this is definitely it seems pre-planned, but it's definitely a heat of the moment. Hey, this guy's got a hawk. Let's get him.
Well, we're kids and we can change into animals. Why not?
Yeah. So they bust up his commercial, which is being shot live for no reason. I didn't understand that at all.
Well, that's how they used to shoot commercials. Every commercial was done. No, not really.
Oh, I was like, what are you talking about? I know you got a broadcast background, so I don't know. Maybe you have more knowledge than I do on that.
No, we did a million takes.
Yeah, so they're for some reason shooting this commercial live, which really is just a plot device so that Jake and the rest of them can see Rachel and Tobias attack this guy in his car dealership. And Tobias, he sets the other hawk free, which is going to become extremely important throughout the rest of the book.
Yeah.
It's a female hawk.
It's nothing weird, though. Tobias definitely mentions that he's not interested in hawks.
He's not interested in that way right now. Later on, he gets a little interested.
Well, so after mucking up this whole car dealership commercial and freeing, Tobias's comrade in arms, or comrade in wings, I guess, we get a little chit chat between the two of them as they're escaping, and you definitely get to see that their relationship has changed in that I guess they're much closer now. I have to suspect that they didn't have a lot of interaction before encountering a dying alien, but now they're very buddy-buddy, it seems.
Yeah, probably just a lot of sideways glances down the hall at school and stuff like that. Because, I don't think this just happened after the Andalite encounter. I mean, and they're pretty close already.
Well, and I think it definitely helps that Rachel's kind of the, destructive, impulsive one that's going to go along with Tobias's crazy plan.
Yeah. And after they're, having this conversation and they've left the dealership, we get a little more of a recap talking about Tobias's, how he changed and how he got stuck as a hawk and his feelings on that. And just to reference my notes again, the note I wrote here was recap, also depressing.
Well, I don't know how you can... Okay, I'm glad that she's going the depressing route with it because it's realistic. If they had tried to, Disney it up with one character being totally fine that he's a bird now and playing it off like it isn't anything, that would be, dishonest, I guess.
Yeah, no. Don't get me wrong. I'm saying these things are depressing. I'm not saying they're bad. They're excellent, and they fit the tone of this book perfectly.
I didn't think that's what you meant, but okay.
Yeah, back off. So after that, well,
Rachel first demorphs from elephant as they're chatting, and they make mention that they can hear the cops coming, and I hope they're not controllers, and that's another excuse to drop a little bit more info. They're talking about how everyone in their group is going to chew them out later. So later, Tobias is flying around, kind of just giving us some general insight on what it's like being a bird, and for the time being, it seems okay.
Yeah, and he's waiting for the other Animorphs to get out of school, and he's kind of bored.
Yeah, that's right. He doesn't go to school anymore. So he's flying around the city, talking about the lovely thermals, enjoying those.
Thermals.
And this is when he kind of notices something strange flying above the city. And the way he notices is at first he kind of senses it or feels it, and I think he points out that he can see a little something in the air, but he's not sure what it is. It definitely looks invisible.
Well, the one thing that he does take away from it is that it's absolutely massive.
Yes, the size of it. He gets a good sense of it just being enormous. So right away, he knows that this is something probably Yerk related.
After he gets done, trying to wrap his head around what just happened in this huge invisible something that flew away right over his head, he finally meets up with the other Animorphs who are out of school, and they had, I guess, all decided to meet up over at Rachel's. Are they at Rachel's? I think. Maybe. Well, they all decided to meet up at one of their houses, and immediately, as they predicted, Marco just starts yelling at him.
Yeah, actually, Tobias even points out, and this is another little moment between him and Rachel with their relationship building here, where Tobias says, I predict Marco's first words are going to be, "Are you insane?" And Rachel kind of gives him a little flirty wink. And of course, Marco's first words are you insane?
Yeah, it's a word Marco's going to be familiar with throughout the rest of the series. Overly familiar with. But yeah, they get chastised for pulling this stupid stunt. I mean, 100% stupid. It's worthless. It did nothing. Sure, they freed this hawk, but that's not going to end the best way ever. But
yeah, and being a live TV commercial, obviously everyone's concerned about, controllers maybe seeing it. And I thought, ironically, Marco is the one who's obviously in the most opposition to this, and he points out that you're not supposed to be saving, hawks. We're supposed to be saving humans from the Yerks, and Tobias directly calls him out by saying, "I thought you didn't want to save the world." And this kind of corners Marco, where he's like, "Well, yeah, but I gotta watch after you guys."
Yeah, and even when they were actually pulling off the great hawk heist, Rachel, the crazed, bloodthirsty, adrenaline-fueled junkie, even warns, like, "Hey, shouldn't we wait until the commercial's over, at least?"
Right.
But after the meeting's over, we do get a twinge of even kind of more depressing talk where Jake's like, "Hey, Tobias, I'll leave some food up in the attic for you."
Yeah, that's another important thing, is that we learned Tobias is now living in Jake's attic.
Being fed table scraps. But yeah, he's living in Jake's attic, so that's just depressing already.
After their meeting, we cut to the next day when Tobias is out flying around the city, and we just get a little bit more background information on him and kind of his family life and upbringing. He mentions that both of his parents are dead, and he's got an aunt and an uncle who apparently hate each other and live in different parts of the country. And the way they managed to explain away his disappearance to his remaining family members is, I think they said they sent letters to the aunt and the uncle saying that Jake, Tobias was staying with either of them.
Yeah, Jake sent letters to his aunt and uncle telling them that he's with the other one. So it should buy him some time.
Maybe.
Yeah, but while he's out thinking about all this stuff and thinking about his family and giving us a little exposition, we get our second encounter with this invisible whatever.
Yeah, and actually this time I thought in kind of a morbid-like scene, if this were, in a movie, we get an entire flock of geese kind of slamming into this invisible ship because they can't see it. And Tobias makes a point of mentioning, like, geese are fragile creatures, and they're pretty, well, they're dead from this.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mention it's like something from a movie, because I specifically wrote down the fact that this is almost identical to a scene in the movie Signs with the M. Night Shyamalan movie Signs, where Joaquin Phoenix's character is talking about how earlier, there's these lights above the city, but during the day, a flock of geese or ducks or something like that were caught on camera flying into one of the spaces where the lights were, and they all just crumpled and fell to the ground.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I think it was just one bird, though.
Yeah. It was a bird or geese or whatever. Doesn't matter. Point is, M. Night Shyamalan, Animorphs fan?
I hope not.
I hope he's more of a fan than he is of The Last Airbender, because I will go ahead and reveal to our listeners that I'm still holding that hope. I was a big supporter of M. Night Shyamalan back in the day, and he's fallen from grace. Don't get me wrong, but I'm hoping for a comeback. And if his comeback is an awesome Animorphs movie, I'll support it.
No, don't let him anywhere near I don't care if he comes out and does Jurassic Park 4 perfectly.
No, he's not doing that. It's being directed by the guy who did Monsters.
No, too late. M. Night Shyamalan presents Jurassic Park.
It's a bold-faced lie.
Regardless, so after Tobias sees these geese all instantly deterrated from this invisible ship, he knows something's up, and he realizes that this ship is kind of flying in a direction towards the mountains. I don't know how he takes stock of an invisible ship and what direction it's floating in, but I guess he's able to see that it looks like it's heading out of town towards the mountains.
I'm sure the thermals were affected, and he could read them so that he could figure out which direction it was going. No, I think massive, even invisible ship, it's going to, have some wind currents with it, and you're going to be able to get, if he can kind of see it anyway, I'm sure he's going to get a sense of which direction it's moving. And it's actually moving the opposite direction of where he felt it was going the day before. So he's now seen it come back from somewhere and then go somewhere. So
well, and I guess you could say that, he's watching it in the sky, and he doesn't have anything better to do with his time, so he's probably staring at it for like hours, thinking about which way it's going.
Yep.
Well, anyway, he discovers that it's moving somewhere. And the next scene we get is everybody meeting again at Cassie's barn to kind of, for Tobias to breach the subject and tell everyone about his discovery. And they also, of course, as they usually do in these first couple of books, discuss if they even should continue doing anything. And Marco is, of course, the main proponent of that.
Yeah, and he jumps in with his reasonings, and he's kind of, I guess, still kind of pissed from the day before and being upstaged by them, or being kind of told down by Tobias, because he throws it back in their faces that, oh, you guys are trying to save the world. Well, what was yesterday? You were just trying to save some stupid bird. And that's a line that hits a little too close to home for Tobias.
Yeah, and while Marco and Tobias are having their little debate, Rachel actually gets pretty fired up over this, and Rachel and Marco get into a little altercation because of Marco's what would you even call it? No. Because of Marco's hesitation to continue fighting.
Yeah, and this leads to a pretty cool little speech by Tobias where he says he's not a leader, but he's going to do something. He doesn't care what anybody else can do. He's definitely going to step up and go figure out what this thing is. It's probably Yerk related, and he's going to do something about it. And this leads to Jake basically saying, you have my sword, and Marco then follows up with, and my axe. Not literally.
Well, yeah, so everyone's in.
Yeah, Jake says,
the mountains mission.
Yeah, and Jake says, you say you're not a leader, but I'll follow you. And that's a pretty cool line.
It is. I can totally imagine it in a movie.
Yep.
So everyone's in for this mountain mission, but as they point out, getting to the mountains is not going to be an easy task, especially since flying really isn't going to work since their bird morphs don't all match. You know what I had thought, though, is why don't they just go ahead and acquire the same type of bird so that they could fly there together?
They have to have access. They have to have access to the birds. They have to find a bird that, flies in a flock. So I don't know. I mean, it's basically just paranoia here at the beginning. They're worried about this, but obviously later on, they fly together. They just try to stay about a mile apart from each other.
Yeah, and I don't see why that couldn't have worked here in this case.
It could have. It could have. I think it's just growing pains. They don't know any better now.
That, and we also get this nice side plan which is a lot more interesting, I guess, where they decide to morph wolves.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, we got to get a new morph, and this is a pretty important morph. They use this one quite a bit throughout the series.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a recurring one for, Cassie, who is the first one to morph wolf.
She falls in love with this morph. It's the first good decision she makes in the series.
Well, and at this point, let's see, what's Cassie's morph list here? She's got a horse morph and a bird morph, and that's about it, isn't it?
Pretty much it. So this is her really getting a battle morph. So, which is cool. It's a wolf. I mean, it's a powerful creature. She does a lot with it in the future.
Yeah, and so they all decide to acquire and morph wolf, and the plan is basically to just run through a forest that, after several miles, it'll take them to an area where they think the ship is heading towards.
Yeah, they're basically just following Tobias's intuition at this point. They don't even know if this whole ship thing exists, but it's cool to see that I don't know if it's just pity or if they actually trust him, but they follow along with his plan.
Yeah, so after everyone's morphed wolf, they had to make the decision that one of them had to be the alpha male wolf, while everyone else acquires female wolves. And after flipping a coin for it between Jake and Marco, Jake just happened to win that coin flip and gets to be the alpha male. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, and we get a couple cool scenes here where they're traveling where they make a joke because Jake won't stop peeing on everything because he's the alpha male and he's basically marking out a big territory. And at one point they all stop and start howling for no reason, and they try to explain it away, but really they all feel just kind of silly afterwards.
Well, and we get to see all this behavior from the eyes of Tobias, who's, a hawk, and so I guess doesn't understand the wolf instincts or anything like that, but Tobias is routinely calling him out like, what are you guys doing? You need to stop howling and stuff.
Well, once they actually get to this kind of lake area, they have this moment of, well, is anything actually going on? Are we here for no reason? They don't have a ton of time left in Morph, but they're waiting and seeing what happens. And right as they're starting to, lose a little faith, they have some park rangers come in, some helicopters and Humvees and all these crazy vehicles that park rangers usually wouldn't have. And suddenly we start seeing some Hork-Bajir as well. And that definitely gives the clue that the Yeerks are here, they're doing something, and it probably has to do with that huge invisible thing.
Yeah, and Tobias is the only one who sees this at first, because he's gone ahead to scout out the area as, the group's eye in the sky. That's kind of his role throughout the series. And after seeing, these park rangers with automatic machine guns and the Hork-Bajir as well, he goes back to try and warn his friends and accidentally ends up running into an actual wolf pack that winds up attacking him.
Yeah, he barely gets out alive.
Yeah, well, he loses a tail feather, as is usual.
Yeah, it happens a lot in this book.
So he does manage to escape and go find his friends and warn them, of course. But nice little moment of tension there, I suppose.
Yeah, and they all go and they're more on board now that things are happening, and there's definitely more of a clue that this is York related. They all head down closer to the lake, trying to see. That seems to be where most of the action's happening. And as they get down there, there's something I wanted to bring up. It says that one of the park rangers sees them and he calms down because it's just a pack of wolves. I don't know if it's just because he's a Yeerk, but I would expect anyone, even a park ranger, who's out by himself in the woods, he sees a pack of wolves to have more of a strong reaction than calming down or turning his back on them or whatever.
Well, he's probably just a big Twilight fan.
Probably. He's like, oh, Jake. Jacob.
and it actually is Jake.
Yeah. It's cross over these series. Anyway, but yeah. So I thought it's crazy that some random, even a park ranger, and I know they even talk about how wolves are being reintroduced to the wild during this time and in this area. It's still crazy to me that he would see this huge pack of wolves and be pretty cool about it and kind of just go about his business.
Well, this is the moment when the giant invisible airship decides to stop being so invisible. And as it appears, we get that, it's gigantic.
It's basically a huge truck.
Yeah, it's they say it's about the size of a aircraft carrier. So yeah, that's big.
Yeah, definitely. And as they're watching it, they see, ports opening up, and they notice these huge scoops on the sides of it. And they determine, callously maybe, but they decide that it's basically a huge truck that's coming down for oxygen and water to bring back up to the mothership.
Well, anyway, the giant tanker is draining the mountain lake, and in case anybody had any doubts, which I'm sure they didn't, several bug fighters were with it. So yeah, it's a York ship for sure.
Yeah, and so they're basically collecting resources, and that's why it had to come down into the atmosphere, and so it could get as much oxygen as possible and suck up water with these things. And as they're watching this and freaking out because of the size of it, we have a little breakdown from Marco again of, if they have something this big, how many of these do they have? How can we possibly do anything about this?
Yeah, and in fact, they decide their only course of action for right now is to retreat, which they do. And on their way out, Tobias just happens to, get a little tingle of happiness seeing the female hawk that he managed to free at the beginning of the book. Flying free, flying beautiful.
Yeah, and
America.
he can't completely understand it. It's not completely based on, being happy to see that he succeeded in his mission to free her. There's something else there. There's something, drawing him to her, and it's not him. It's not his human side.
No, it's all Hawk.
Yeah. After he has this encounter with the girl hawk that he freed, the female version of himself, he goes back to find the Animorphs, and he finds them in a little bit of a precarious situation.
They're in a pickle.
Yeah, it's definitely a pickle. They have run into the wolves that Tobias had almost been killed by earlier, and they just are in a showdown because apparently these wolves had just killed a rabbit, and they're ready to fight to the death for it, apparently.
Well, yeah, that's what animals do. They have to fight to the death for this animal roadkill. And Tobias comes in, and he tries to talk his friends out of it, but they're like, "Oh, we're locked in this struggle."
They're half scared because they don't know what to do, and they're afraid to make any sudden movements because they might attack. And I think whenever they get really scared or really into a fight or something, I think they do slip a little bit into that animal instinct, and the animal instinct says we need to stand our ground.
Yeah, I'm sure the animal instincts were overpowering as well, but Tobias, being the clever bird that he is, just manages to swoop in and take the rabbit, ending the conflict. I think he might lose another couple of tail feathers in the process, but he comes out okay.
Yeah, and it gets them out of that particular pickle, as you put it.
Yeah.
And then right into another one, because as they're on their way and trying to get out of this territory, these other wolves, they make a comment to Tobias being like, how are we doing on time? What's our time limit on morphs yet? Which they've already been in for quite a while. They haven't morphed out at any point since they traveled, the 20 miles up to this lake. So Tobias goes and checks that out.
Yeah, and he finds one of the controller's trucks nearby, and with his amazing hawk eyesight, he can see that they have already, at least by this truck's clock, I guess, they've gone several minutes over their time limit. So yeah, he panics and hightails it back to his friends, warning them to demorph.
He rushes back, tells them that they're really close to the time limit, even though he thinks that they're probably over it. And they obviously, and for good reason, flip out and start morphing back immediately. But it's not going completely well. It's a little slow. It's not acting normal.
No, I would say that they're probably right on that cusp of the time limit. And who knows if it's a solid 2 hours exactly or anything like that. But I would imagine that the closer you get to that time limit, the more and more sticky the morph gets.
Yeah, I think that's what she implied, and I like that. I think you could probably go over the 2-hour time limit. It would just get harder and harder to get back to your normal form, and there wouldn't be
that could be what they're
period.
experiencing here.
Yeah, I mean they're probably 1 or 2 minutes over, and it's just even that close to the time limit, they're struggling.
They do struggle a lot, but they end up all making it out just fine.
Thanks to Cassie.
Because this is book 3, and there's no way anybody else is going to get stuck in morph this early on.
Yeah, Cassie is able to get out first because she's just awesome. She's gold star, number 1 morpher in the group.
She gets an A+.
Exactly, and she talks everybody back into their original forms, which that's good. You know, who knows if they would have made it without her? Maybe, probably, but she definitely boosted morale there for a moment.
Well, and the happy moment, the triumphant moment of everybody managing to morph out has kind of a bad effect on Tobias. Just seeing his friends, so close to becoming what he himself was, or even something stuck halfway in between. He definitely fears for a moment that his friends are going to be trapped between morphs and be some kind of, half human, half wolf freak. And after seeing all of his friends barely manage to make it out of their morphs, he kind of loses it himself. And he really does not want to be trapped in his hawk morph anymore.
Well, I like that they keep it ambiguous. It's not really. It doesn't tell you what his reaction is or why he flies off all suddenly. I think you could interpret that a couple ways. I think the most messed up interpretation of that scene is that maybe for a second he was almost glad that maybe he'd have other people trapped in a morph that could relate to him and would be on his side. That's most likely not how it is, but I think there's a bunch of different ways you could interpret that scene.
He almost explicitly states he's sick with the feeling of being trapped forever. After Tobias loses control of himself and flies away, he goes home to Jake's attic to eat some of the food that Jake left for him, which he points out that, hawks, even though Jake left him, bits of meat and some potatoes and vegetables, all the hawks really can eat is the meat. But he can't tell Jake that because he feels like he's going to hurt his feelings or something.
Yeah, and he just forces that down because it's cold, burnt, cooked meat. That's not what a hawk wants.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and after hanging out in Jake's...
So he scarfs down this food or whatever, and he talks about how he can't handle... His bird morph can't handle that food. It's, a hawk's not made to process green beans and mashed potatoes. So I wanted to raise this question to you, Mitchell. So if Cassie eats a Hershey's bar and morphs into a dog, is she gonna get sick? Is she gonna fall over and die? What happens to that food that's in her stomach?
We don't know that, and as far as I know, I don't think they ever address that. What happens to stomach content?
And this is
stuff. Morphs.
This is what I want to know, because I mean, technically at that point, it's being processed by your body. So maybe that goes to wherever the rest of their body goes. That's brought up later in the series. The shoved into that place I won't mention yet. But
hell,
no, zero space. But
I know.
Yeah, but I just found that interesting because a lot of animals can't handle a lot of human food, and they morph into a lot of animals. So, but I guess morphing into a flea or a fly, that food can't be there because it's bigger than them. So I guess it does go to zero space.
I think it's safe to assume that, yeah, whatever's in their stomachs, whatever's in their bowels, probably all goes to Z-space. Well, anyway, after we get a little bit of information about Tobias's eating habits, he decides that the attic is boring him for the evening and decides to go see his girl crush, Rachel.
He leaves the attic because it's just horrible. He's living in an attic in a drawer with an extra comforter in it. So he can't stand there very long. So yeah, he definitely gets out of there as soon as possible and heads to his favorite perch, you might call it, Rachel's.
Yeah, and I don't really blame him so far. Rachel, I think, has been probably the most accepting of him. I mean, he's obviously not going to go to Marco's for any sort of comfort. And he even states in the book, I don't think Marco and I will ever be close.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be weird. Even though, like, if he went over to Cassie's or something, I'm sure she'd, sit down and talk and hear him out or whatever. But I think with Rachel, it's not pity. And that's what he needs. He needs someone who's going to talk to him like a person still.
Tobias goes to talk to Rachel to basically confide in her that, he thinks he's starting to lose himself to the Hawk. And she tries her best to kind of comfort him, but I don't think it really has any effect.
No, not really. She does give him a picture of himself, which I thought, this is why I think that there was something going on before the encounter with the Andalite, because Rachel has had this picture of Tobias, an older picture of him, for a while. So I think without him knowing, she was probably interested in him for a while, and it was just kind of a crush. And now they're forced together by fate or something else.
We need a Tobias Rachel prequel.
Oh yeah, an entire prequel series where they're just
passing notes in their 7th grade.
Not even that. It's just Rachel passing notes to Cassie, being like, "What do you think of that Tobias kid?" And Cassie's just like, "That smelly kid in the back who doesn't change his clothes."
Well, he's not Jake, so.
Well, he doesn't seem very leadery. Anyway, but yeah. So she gives him a picture of himself, and it raises his spirits a little bit. It's the right thing at the right time.
Well, what she's constantly doing is reminding him of his humanity. She's, reinforcing this idea that he's not a Hawk, even though he's trapped in the body of a Hawk. She keeps bringing him back to this human state.
So Tobias goes home to his attic. He sleeps it off. Flies around the next day, and Jake calls another meeting. And where does Jake call the meeting? At Jake's house. An official meeting of the Animorphs at Jake's house with a controller who lives there. I just thought that was the dumbest thing in the world.
Well, Tobias watched, Tom leave the house and go to his meeting of the sharing, so it's reasonable to assume that they've got some time.
It's still, they have plenty of places to meet. They don't need to switch off to be nice. They can go ahead and skip Jake's house for that week. Or every week. So at the meeting at Jake's house, they discuss the mission to do something to this ship. And everybody's kind of just talking about how can we destroy it? How do we destroy this huge thing? And obviously, Marco and some of the others are against it completely, because like, how could we possibly fight this thing? It's bigger than half our town, Well, what are we going to do? And somebody, who gets the bright idea to do this? Do you remember?
Marco kind of comes up with the idea of, well, maybe instead of focusing on destroying the ship, we should focus on just revealing it. If we could somehow screw up its invisibility, cloaking mechanism. And Marco comes up with that idea, and then Jake is the one who submits their actual plan.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, Marco is part of this conversation about how to destroy it, and he halfway says, well, why don't we just... And then he stops, because he's about to give a great plan that would put all their lives in danger. But he goes ahead and follows through after they push him a little bit, and he's saying, well, we could wait till it's over the city and try to take out the stealth, reveal it to the world, reveal the Yeerks to, authorities and people who could actually take this fight away from us.
Yeah, and in theory, that, sounds like a pretty decent plan. I mean, if they reveal the Yeerks now, at this point in the game, I'd say they'd probably be off the hook.
No, I completely disagree. And it's Cassie who says something along the lines of, they would have attacked openly if they could have. That's how we know it's safe to, go into open war, because if the Yeerks were capable of wiping us out, they would have just done that. They would have just attacked us outright. And I know this is using future knowledge, but there are at least 4 books that say the only reason that the Yeerks are being, all sly and working in the shadows is because one Yeerk made the decision for them to do that. And they would wipe out like half the population if they did, but there's a lot of Yeerks who are fine with that. And they would completely win in a straight-up fight with humans. So this is the worst idea the Animorphs have ever had. Literally. They could literally wipe out the human race if they decide something different here.
Real quick, did you say that Cassie said that? Cassie was arguing with Marco?
No. I said that Cassie said that they would have attacked openly if they could have. I thought she said that.
No, it's Tobias who says that.
Still, it's just a terrible plan, and at this point, I'm just on the edge of my seat, being like, "Huh,
don't do this, guys."
Is this the point where the Animorphs destroy humanity? Possibly.
The plan, by the way, as Jake points out, is that they want to get inside the ship somehow and disable it. And in order to do that, they are going to morph fish and get sucked up by the pipes in that mountain lake as the Yeerks try draining it.
Yeah, so not a bad plan. I mean, for what they're trying to do, the plan makes sense. Jake's pretty good at coming up with those. So they're all feeling pretty good about this. It's a real mission. They haven't been that successful in their missions so far, but this one seems like they have a little intel that the Yeerks don't know about. So they're feeling pretty good. They all start heading off in directions. Jake and Marco kind of make a comment about playing some video games or working on homework or something like that.
The entire group splits up, basically, and as you said, Marco and Jake are going to play their video games, and as Rachel points out, she has a gymnastics event to be attending at the mall. And Marco, he kind of goads her on a little bit by saying he's going to show up and, watch her. And I never really caught on to this before, but I'm coming around more and more to the idea of this kind of love triangle sort of relationship forming between Marco, Rachel, and Tobias.
Who's shipping now?
Who's shipping now? Yeah, well, that should go on a T-shirt. Who's shipping?
No, I'm saying you. I'm saying you're the shipper.
Well, first of all, Tobias and Rachel, that's kind of a given. They're setting it up,
they're the
from the beginning of
couple.
this book. But I just the way I'm imagining it is Rachel is kind of torn between Tobias, the boy she actually loves, who she can't really have, at least at this point, just because of the anatomy involved. Whereas Marco is, this good-looking kind of cynical bad boy. and they definitely have that flirty sort of relationship where they never really act on anything. But
yeah, well, I mean, I hate to reference books that we haven't gotten to yet, but in this case, I'll make the exception. In the Megamorphs book, where they redo everything, where they don't meet the Andalite and they're just normal kids without powers, Rachel and Marco date for a while. They're dating throughout that entire book. So,
now who's shipping K.A. Applegate?
Yeah, K. Applegate is incredibly aware of our emotions and feelings towards these characters, and she's just manipulating them and just wringing her hands in evil delight.
I'm saying it right now. I'm a huge fan of Marco and Cassie.
Yeah. Well, we've actually had a couple emails about my reference to the Jake and Tobias ship, so apparently that's a popular one.
Some of those emails you can't share on the air. They're not appropriate.
I can't share any of them. They were pretty racy, and there were pictures.
Oh boy, here we go again. But with all the characters splitting up to go their various ways, Jake kind of takes it upon himself to make Tobias, feel useful and just kind of give him a little morale boost. So Jake asks Tobias to kind of scope out that mountain area again, since he's got some free time available to him. And, see if he can't find a place for them to camp out for their big fishing mission, I should say.
Yeah, and he finds a cave that he thinks will work really well for them to kind of hide out during the pre-staging events when the Yeerks get there and everything. So he's feeling pretty good. He starts heading back to the city or the main area where they all live. And at this point, this is probably the best he's felt since he was trapped. He's actually in a pretty decent mood.
Yeah, well, and a part of that is now he's trying to focus on the good of being a hawk rather than the bad. And for him, and probably for any kid who's, 14 years old, he's thinking about all the free stuff he can do now, which is watch sporting events and outdoor concerts, and
you can go to the gardens without having to pay.
Oh yeah, and ride roller coasters.
Yeah. But yeah, so he's in a great mood, and all of this comes crashing down around both us, the audience, the readers, Tobias, the player,
the Pemelites, just everyone.
Yeah, this ends already in tragedy. This little moment of happiness as he kind of lets himself go to the flying, and he's kind of lost in thought about how his life could be manageable, and the hawk just takes over for just a split second. That's all. Well, it takes.
Really, it's all that damn rat's fault for looking so tempting to him all of a sudden.
I mean, I'll be walking down the street and I'll see a rat and I'll be like, "Damn you, you plump bastard! I just want to tear you apart."
If only I were a hawk.
Well, I wouldn't say that stopped me before. I think we've all woken up in a back alley covered in rat blood at some point in our lives.
Twice this year.
Twice this week.
Yeah, Tobias loses himself to the hawk's instincts, probably accidentally, and finds himself, hunting and eating a rat.
And he's horrified. He obviously breaks down, but it's mostly because of how good it tastes, because it's actually, he's finally doing what his body has been just yearning for. So it's not really a bad thing. He's not feeling bad. It's his human side that's feeling bad because he's feeling good about eating this rat.
Yeah, well, when you've got a human brain and a bird brain occupying the same space...
What? Where are you going with that?
It's not normal. It ain't natural. Well, with Tobias going crazy, because right now is his lowest moment, absolute lowest moment, he no longer... He just wants out. He wants to be done with the hawk. So he, naturally, like when most people go insane, he heads for the mall.
Yeah, he goes there at top speed, and it's really just him falling back into this pattern of going to Rachel when he's feeling at his worst. And right now, even though I'm sure he's not thinking straight, I'm sure the hawk is still in there messing with him, but he's just flying top speed towards her very public exhibition in the mall.
Yeah, and I've really got to give props to Miss Applegate for this.
Mrs.
I've really got to give props to K.A. Applegate for this.
Mrs. K. Applegate.
I've got to give props to Katrina. I got to give props to K.A. Applegate for doing this and not really pulling any punches, because this is a very dark scene, and it's gonna get a whole lot darker.
So Tobias, he's coming towards the mall, and the first thing he does is head towards the front doors. I mean, that's how he's gonna get in, and so he's heading towards these doors, and his initial thought isn't, how am I gonna get in? How am I gonna get around this? I'm gonna wait for somebody to get. He's just going towards them. Whatever happens, happens, and he's in a dive. I mean, he's going, 60, 70 miles an hour. I don't know how fast red-tailed hawks get, but he's going fast enough that he's not going to survive a hard impact. And luckily, these first front doors are open by some bystander, and he shoots into the mall straight ahead.
Tobias makes his way through the mall, kind of looking for Rachel, because he knows she's there for her gymnastics thing.
He's frantic. He's losing his mind. He's just heading straight towards the center of the mall, which that happens to be where Rachel is at the moment.
No, I think he's got a Rachel sonar detector, and he knows exactly where she is at all times.
Yeah, she had a picture of him. He had a GPS planted on her backpack. So, mutually exclusive love. But yeah, he's breaking through. He's passing the Gap. He's passing all these other stores. I'm sure the reprint changed Barnes & Noble for Walden Books or whatever. And finally he gets to the center of the mall, where she is right up there on the balance beam, showing off for, it seems like hundreds of people are watching this gymnastics event.
Yeah, and she recognizes almost immediately that it's Tobias, and I believe he even thought speaks to her.
I think he's just flying at top speed. It's like he's not there to see her. Like, he went in that direction, obviously, because he's in love with her or whatever. But he almost ignores her. He flies right past her and goes towards a wall, and then flies back.
But he does say, "I killed. You don't understand, Rachel. I'm lost. I killed."
Yeah, when he falls. So he's flying towards her. He sees her, eventually.
Tobias is flying around the mall all frantically, and he finally sees Rachel, and she's up on the balance beam. And there's a moment where he falls out of the sky, and she kind of dramatically catches him, and before tossing him back up into the air. And this is the point when Tobias, confides in her that he did it. He killed finally. He hunted and he's just terrified.
It's a weird relationship they have in the sense that, this is, I don't know about you, but middle school or early high school, I didn't share a lot of secrets with the girl I was crushing on. I was trying to make myself look good to her. But he immediately goes straight to her. He reveals what just became his deepest, darkest secret. And yeah, she tries to console him before kind of throwing him up in the air so he can get out without people grabbing him and making it look like he's...
Yeah, she tries to make it look like like she's throwing him away because she's scared, but in reality, she's throwing him to safety. In what I would say is one of the darkest moments of the series so far, you have Tobias flying towards a skylight in the mall, and it's glass, obviously, and all he can see above is the sky, and the hawk's instincts are just running amok in his mind right now, and all he wants to do is be in that sky. And the boy in him knows that it's a glass window, and he knows full well what's going to happen when he runs into this glass pane, but he just doesn't care at this point. And it's a full-blown suicide attempt, basically.
It's not like the front door where I guess in the back of his mind, someone could open it or something. This isn't going to move. He's going to hit it, and he has all intention of hitting it.
Until a well-timed baseball kind of breaks the ceiling apart, and we get a one-sentence reveal that it was Marco who ended up throwing the ball. So I guess Marco did follow through with his teasing and taunting of Rachel, saying that he was going to come watch her gymnastics event. And luckily he did. So I guess the moral of the story is that it's a good thing Marco's kind of a horn dog.
Or, for you, I guess, the new crowd of giggling teenage girls who have joined our podcast because we're talking about shipping every 5 seconds, you could take that as Marco was actually just there to support her, and he had to do it in secret because he knew that she wouldn't take him seriously. But he was there watching her, he just wanted to see her perform and do a good job, and then he was there to save Tobias's life. So Marco's really, you can call him an asshole all day long. He's the white knight of the series.
Yeah, except that he is a complete and utter dick to Tobias at every chance he gets here, but
in a good way.
In a good way. He's gonna, berate him for being trapped in a bird body, but at the same time he's gonna save his life.
You know what? But as is mentioned in multiple times in this book and in later ones, Marco is also appreciated by Tobias for being able to joke about his tragedy, and it makes Tobias feel better all the time.
That is true. And anyway, the glass is shattered, and Tobias luckily escapes with his life, although, golfer clap here for K.A. Applegate, accurately depicting a suicide attempt from this boy stuck in the body of a hawk. I'm not sure a lot of people saw that coming, really.
Yeah, for this scene where it's a kid trapped as a hawk, flying through the mall, which could be pretty silly in general, it plays pretty real. I mean, it's what he's feeling, what he's talking about. It plays like a depressed kid who just doesn't have any other options, doesn't want to live with what he's done, and can't see past, the short period of life that he's already lived. And I think that relates to a lot of people. It relates to some things in my life when I was that age. So, it hits pretty close to home.
It's definitely not a comedic moment.
No, and I love the sentence that this chapter ends on. It's a narration by Tobias, And the last sentence is, Tobias, a boy whose face I could no longer remember, no longer existed.
Well, after Tobias loses himself and goes crazy here, he goes off to live as a hawk for a while. He just decides, he's done.
Yeah, he actually goes back to the meadow where he had his first kill. And he lives there for, what do you think, a couple days, couple weeks?
Yeah, I think he mentions that he's there for a week.
Yeah, because he's before the mission.
Or about a week.
Yeah, it's leading up to the mission. So
yes, and this is an interesting chapter because not only is he going crazy to go live as a hawk, but what eventually snaps him out of it is that he sees a Hork-Bajir chasing a human, and at first, with being in his bird brain mode, all he sees is a predator chasing prey. But, the human side quickly comes around and he realizes this is a Hork-Bajir controller here. And he realizes that it's not all about, animals needing to hunt prey for a living. This Yerk situation is nothing like that. And that's ultimately what snaps him out of this hawk funk and sends him back to his friends.
Yeah, and off screen, which we hear about here in a moment, he helps this guy even further. He leads him away from the Hork-Bajir. He thought speaks him, telling him where to go and that he should keep quiet. And this is all revealed in the next scene where he, reveals himself back to Rachel after being gone for so long. And she's obviously worried and yelling at him for all that. But he tells her that he helped this guy. And it made him, really realize that no matter how far he goes and how much he lives like a hawk, which he's accepted living like a hawk now, he's going to continue killing and eating and living in a meadow and a tree and all of that. Even if his body's doing all that, I think he's got it ingrained in his mind that he is who he is. He's human. He's Tobias, and that's a big turn for this book and his character, and plays out through the rest of the series.
Well said.
I try to have those moments of insight. I think I've had a couple now. I'm trying.
Tobias makes it back just in time for their pre-planned mission.
An important part that I wanted to bring up.
Go for it.
At the end of this Rachel visit, I think we've been talking about this through the first two episodes, and this is really important for this episode too, is that this is the moment where Tobias gets his reason to fight the Yerks as well. It's not just his reason for, holding on to his humanity, but he explains to her, when he saw that Hork-Bajir go after that human, he realized that every controller has both the Yerk in their mind, and it also has the original host, the body, the person who was, who was turned over to that controller, who was taken over. They're still there, and they're trapped. They can't do anything. They can't move. They can only see the actions of their controller. So he realized that, and he can relate to it. And he says that's his reason to fight the Yerks now. So if each of these beginning books are revealing one by one their reason for sticking to the fight and fighting this war, here's Tobias's. He empathizes with hosts.
Yeah, he's definitely the one that probably has the biggest reason to fight. Just, with being trapped in the body of an animal, he doesn't have much else to do at the moment. Yeah, he could go live as a bird, but, why? What kind of life would that be?
Yeah, and he has his reason to fight now, and that's it's going to make him a contributor. So now you can talk about the mission.
Awesome. The mission starts, and Tobias manages to lead everyone to the bear cave that he discovered in the mountains. And, everyone's quite worried that there's going to be something in the bear cave, but...
Possibly a bear.
Quick to point out, yeah, possibly a bear, or a skunk, or anything. But Tobias is quick to point out that it's empty. Don't worry, everybody. And this time, because they know that, as wolves, they can't carry anything with them because that would look very conspicuous. So they outfit Tobias with a small pouch, like a little tan pouch that I think they strap onto his leg. And it's got a watch and some fishing lines and hooks in it and a small lighter, which I don't think they do anything with. So these are the tools that they have, and their plan now is just to catch some fish, which I thought was kind of a ridiculous part of the plot. Why wouldn't they have acquired fish before going up there? Why would
Either way, they got to get a fish, and they have to specifically get, like a trout or something that can, do well in this environment. You can't just get, goldfish or anything.
No, and I'm not saying that. I'm saying they should have just gone. And here's another thing. They point out at some point or something, they can't acquire DNA from a dead animal, can they?
No, definitely not. No.
All right, well, that ruins that idea.
Yeah, well, and, this isn't Minnesota, bro. This is Northern California, so you can't just go down to the old fishery and grab a bagel. And
the hatchery?
Yeah, you can't. Those are...
It's right down the road from me.
Exactly. So they're playing this one by ear, and...
Well, I still think that they could have perhaps found the time to acquire some kind of freshwater fish locally.
This is really all Cassie's fault. Because... No, I'm serious. Because they get down there, and the majority of them are like, oh, this is a good part of the plan. We can just catch a fish. And none of them have ever fished before. They all think it'll be easy. And once they're already down there, and they're, hooking the line onto the hook and getting ready to fish, Cassie's like, well, I don't know, guys. It's actually a lot harder than you think it is. Like, why are you telling us this now? Where you been with that information, Cassie? What the hell?
That is true. And yet, Cassie is also the first one who manages to catch a fish.
Yeah, luckily, she's got some skills to bring to the table, because otherwise they just boot her out of the Animorphs.
She does, which is kind of weird that, she's the animal expert of the group, and yet she's also the fisherman of the group.
Well, she's country. She's used to living out in the woods and doing things like that. That's what she's into.
Sure.
She was that girl back in middle school who, if you said the wrong thing to the teacher or something, she would correct you before the teacher could. Like, she was that girl. Just incredibly annoying and, I don't know. Except she knows about raccoon poop. So that's the difference.
Well, everybody's, fishing and hanging out and enjoying the lovely mountain scenery, and Tobias takes to the skies to kind of scout things out, as he usually does, and he runs into his Lady Hawk friend again and winks at her or something. And then finally, this is when the controllers start to show up once again. And Tobias quickly warns everyone that, they've got to hide in the cave quick because there's helicopters showing up.
And he notices that they're starting to open fire on random wildlife around the lake. So this puts a little hamper on their plan.
Bad guys are there. Controllers are there. They're shooting at any animal that moves. And they make a point to mention that one of the controllers almost vaporizes a deer with a Dracon beam.
Well, he vaporizes half of it.
Yeah. And, well, they didn't want to, overkill it. So, only half the deer.
Yeah.
And Cassie's quick to point out as Tobias is warning all of his friends that the controllers have arrived. He's like, yeah, they even Draconed a deer. And Cassie's like, oh, poor deer. Deer's never hurt anybody.
Yeah, she's ripped out like 3 Hork-Bajir throats at this point. Oh, no, she hasn't. A horse morph. Never mind.
She's just eaten an entire police officer.
Well, he wasn't a deer. I mean, no, anyway, but... So, yeah, Tobias, he gets back and he warns them that security is overhauled. I mean, it's way too tight. They're looking for anything, any bug, bird, deer that moves.
Oh, speaking of overhauled security, the Blade ship arrives.
Of course it does.
With it comes Visor 3.
Of course.
And this is the point where, they start to debate. Obviously, with the arrival of Visor 3, things have changed a bit, and they start to debate about whether or not they should go through with the plan. But pretty much everybody is still on board, surprisingly, except for Tobias.
Yeah, he's just getting too worried, and he's kind of the cause of this ramped up security, because he helped that one guy get away. So
yeah, and I think also just the fact that he feels that he's not going to be able to help anybody, and he doesn't want to be guilty, because this is sort of his mission that he's led everyone on.
But they come up with an insane idea, as Marco would put it, to go ahead and morph the fish out of water and have Tobias fly them one by one through the cave entrance, past all the security, and be dropped torpedo-esque into the lake.
I don't see anything insane about that.
I think it's perfectly normal
It just
as well.
makes sense.
I think Kay Applegate is overreacting with her adjectives. But yeah, so they begin initializing this insane plan, or as some people would put it.
Since Cassie's the one who suggests the plan, she's the one who morphs the fish first. Just like she morphed the wolf first, actually.
Yeah,
she's kind of their
this time,
go-to morpher.
Except this time as a fish, she doesn't try to attack and kill all of them. So that's a plus on her end.
No, she does. It's just far less threatening.
She splashes them.
Those trout instincts, man.
Yeah, they're crazy.
Natural born killers.
Yeah. So as you know, they're one by one getting dropped into this lake. It's going pretty well. It's going not bad.
Surprisingly.
Yeah, but we get down to a single Animorph left. It's, of course,
surprise, surprise.
It's Rachel. And they hear some talking and some banter out in the bushes leading into the cave. And who shows up but two characters who I wish could remain throughout the rest of the series.
Oh, they need a spin-off. Just the wacky human and Hork-Bajir pair.
That's what I wrote down in my notes. I wrote down the exact same thing. I wrote down the hilarious adventures of Human Controller and Hork-Bajir Controller.
Dude, no, even better. Throw in a taxon, just one taxon, and make it a Three Stooges parody.
No. It would be like It'd be like it'd be the three of them living together, like I said earlier, in like an apartment complex or something. And the Hork-Bajir and the Controller would constantly be, arguing about everything, and they'd be making fun of each other or whatever. And then at the end of every episode, the Taxon would come out and be like, "You guys are making too much noise." And they'd be like,
and
"Oh,
the entire
Taxon."
studio audience would cheer and applaud at his arrival.
Yeah, but this banter between them two is pretty funny, and it makes zero sense because it's two Yeerks. It's not a Hork-Bajir and a human. It's two Yeerks. And yet the Hork-Bajir Yeerk is acting all dumb and brutish, and like making fun of the human for being puny.
Well, yeah, it's at that point, it's just because the Hork-Bajir Controller can slice through the brush so easily, and the human controller's kind of giving him, what's he giving him? He's giving him the business.
Yeah, and I think with Yeerks and their entire lifestyle, maybe they do start to take on some traits of their host body, just because they're so, they're so enveloped.
They're so attached.
Yeah, I mean, they're so close to their host, the host of the most, that they take on some attributes maybe, and that's where we get this awesome pairing, coming in, crashing into this cave.
Right. Oh yeah, that's what's happening. So with these controllers moving in on them, that spurns them along, and Tobias has to pick up Rachel mid-morph. She's not even completely morphed into the trout at this point, and he's got to fly her straight out through the cave, right past the controllers, and drop her in the lake, which he manages to do, except that one of the controllers, the Hork-Bajir controller, manages to fire at him with a Dracon beam, and this is not good for anybody, really.
No.
Definitely not good for the Hork-Bajir controller, and definitely not good for the Animorphs.
Yeah, the Dracon beam passes him. It hits the bottom of this, super carrier truck ship from the beginning, and this causes the Yeerks to all kind of huddle up around Visitor 3, and I assume the Hork-Bajir gets killed. But before that, he mentions that a hawk was acting strange, and this is corroborated by another human controller, and it's also corroborated. It's also said by someone else who saw him earlier, right at the beginning of this mission. And so then all the Yeerks just pan out looking for a hawk to go after, and they find him.
Yeah, but way before all that happens, we've got all the Animorphs in trout morph in the water, and they're swimming about and kind of getting used to the animal instincts, which there really aren't that many instincts for a trout. They just kind of mentioned that the eyesight is not very good, but it's not a very uncomfortable morph, other than the fact that they can't stop thinking about, the fact that they could be fried with a side of tartar sauce and some lemon.
Yeah.
It's that's kind of disturbing. But all the Animorphs, aside from Tobias, are in the lake, and they're ready to start checking out this giant straw that's basically draining the lake. And this is when Tobias flies off and notices the little Yerk controller powwow going on. And he also notices Visser 3 just being an ass and killing the Hork-Bajir controller for his mistake of firing at the ship.
After he sees all this, he heads back to his friends, who start one by one shooting up the tube and into the main body of the Yerk supercarrier truck thing ship.
We can just call it a truck ship.
I like my name.
Supercarrier Ultimo?
Super Voltron truck. We'll just call it the Nostromo. But anyway, so they one by one go shooting up this roller coaster ride of a straw into the truck ship. And as they get there, they see that, well, there's not a lot of water and there's a lot of space, and there could be a way into the ship through a grate in the ceiling, but they're going to have to wait for the water to rise quite a bit before they can get there.
Yeah. And that's kind of unfortunate for Tobias, who at the moment is kind of just flying around. And this is also the point when Visser 3 decides to dispatch some helicopters and some bug fighters into the sky, specifically to find the bird that is, well, acting like an Andalite warrior, basically.
Yeah, and they find him. It's not too hard. Once they get coordinated and they, start looking in the right places, they catch him pretty quick. And there's not a lot he can do here. He's kind of trapped. And there's
not a lot that he can do, but there is one thing that he manages to give him a little bit of safety, at least for a little while. And that is by landing on the giant truck ship where they don't dare shoot at.
Yeah, they saw what happened to the Hork-Bajir, who hit it with a tiny Dracon beam, so they're not about to start firing their main cannons at it.
Definitely.
Yeah. As he's trying to figure out his next move, sitting on top of this giant ship, and bug fighters and helicopters are kind of just hovering all around him, he gets back in contact with the rest of the Animorphs, who they've gotten to the grate, this savior of theirs that was supposed to lead them into the bridge of the ship. And it's completely locked off, not getting through it. They have no way to get into it.
Yeah, and again, I think it's worth mentioning that it's this warning, this update is coming from Rachel, and she's basically just telling them that things are not going well, and they're stuck in the tank, and the hatch won't open, and they're afraid that they're going to get stuck in the ship, when it goes back to the Yerk headquarters, Yerk HQ.
And I like what Kay Applegate did here. It's been a pretty dark book. It's been pretty morose and crestfallen throughout most of the book. And I guess just to lighten the mood, she went ahead and had all the Animorphs tell Tobias to go ahead and kill them so they can't be captured.
Well, it makes sense. Rachel's like, we don't want to be made into controllers. You got to do something. If you can destroy the ship, go for it. And you know what? There's another line here that I almost kind of shuddered as I read over, just because of the cliche of it. I thought this line was very cliche. But you have Tobias and Rachel in what they assume is going to be their last communication for a while. We have Tobias start out this sentence, "I never told you, ... And Rachel replies, "You didn't have to. I knew."
Yeah, it's like a mixture of Han Solo and 50 romantic comedies all thrown into one.
Kind of. And I guess it makes sense given their interaction up until this point in the series, but a little cliche.
Yeah, I would have liked a little more playing off of the fact that they're teenagers and kind of had maybe some kind of awkward goodbye. Where even if they flat out, I think a writer of the caliber of K.A. Applegate could have pulled off something where they actually say, like, "I love you" to each other, and it's just like awkward teenager "I love you" goodbye or something. But I don't know.
She should have passed Tobias a note that read, "Will you go out with me? Yes, no, maybe, circle 1."
No, it would have just been Tobias being like, if I were a human and I wasn't about to die, I would have asked you to homecoming. And then she says, you didn't have to, I know. So yeah, desperate attempt by the Animorphs. I mean, it's crazy of them to even ask Tobias to do this, because what's he going to do? I mean, come on. He's Birdmorph. He's technically the weakest Animorph at this point, just because he can't really jump into battle. And they ask him to take out this humongous Delaware-sized ship.
So the Animorphs that are stuck inside the tank ship have to demorph now, because they're worried about their chances as Trout. And they're going to demorph and lose communication with Tobias. And as they do this, Tobias is basically cut off now. And, his friends' lives are on the line. So he's really got nothing to lose at this point. And luckily, he's spurned into action here by, as he's sitting there reveling in his safety, a couple of Taxxons start filing out on top of the ship where he's sitting. He's perched right now to retrieve him. And he manages to fly low enough to avoid anybody shooting at him. And he snags a Dracon beam from one of the Taxxons. Yeah,
the Taxxons are pretty weak in general. And every time they're sent out by themselves to take on one of the Animorphs, they get just slaughtered. And in this instance, they make an even bigger party foul, and they let him get a weapon. He grabs the Dracon beam and hugging the top of the ship so that the fighters and the helicopters still can't fire on him. He heads straight to the bridge at the other end of the bow or starboard side or whatever it is. And once he gets there, this is maybe one of the little sillier parts of this book. He sees the Taxxons. He sees the controllers inside on the bridge controls, and he just
hanging out.
Yeah, and they look at him. He looks at them, and he just starts firing wildly. And he takes out like everybody on the bridge and starts.
It cuts through this ship like butter. Yeah. Apparently,
and he hits the controls. And I don't know that much about intergalactic travel and spaceships and engineering them, but I'm pretty sure there's probably enough fail safes that if something goes down or is broken, it doesn't blow the ship up. Especially these are just the controls. He's not firing into the core reactor or anything. He's shooting the controls. It shouldn't blow the ship up.
And how strong are these Dracon beams? Apparently, they're just slicing through walls. And
he must have held down the button.
Oh, he says he's squeezing it, and hawk talons aren't exactly made for firing a gun.
It's like Gantz guns.
Points out. So he's carving this Yerk ship apart.
Yeah, single-handedly.
Single-talonly manages to bring down the ship on his own.
Yeah, and this I guess the pressure buildup from every single part of the ship exploding makes the side blow out where all the water's being held. And
well, he runs into a helicopter and a bug fighter.
Oh wait, yeah, doesn't it? He does something where it makes the bug fighter crash into the side.
Just knocking out the ship's control console, I guess, is enough to make it crash into this nearby hovering helicopter and bug fighter, which then tears a giant gash in the side of the ship, releasing all the water and the Animorphs, who are, human currently. And they're just kind of free-falling at the moment.
Yeah.
And I guess the ship's not hovering over the lake particularly anymore. Because
it probably lists to the side or something. But
yeah,
they start falling out, and they're, like you said, completely free-falling. And Tobias kind of just writes them off. I mean, he's like, oh, I didn't think that they'd be that way. I didn't know that would happen. And he doesn't hold out much hope for them being able to do anything but fall to the ground.
Yeah, he knows he can't do anything. He's not going to airlift, any human to safety.
Yeah, but luckily, not luckily, skillfully, the Animorphs immediately start turning into their respective Birdmorphs, and they barely make it out into the tree line.
It's quite dramatic.
Yeah,
this one page where they're falling / morphing.
I was on the edge of my whatever I was sitting on while I was reading it.
Toilet
probably.
seat.
But yeah, so they make it out alive. The day is saved. And right when you think, okay, happy ending. You know what? You turn this one around, Applegate. Thank you.
Kudos.
Yeah, Tobias looks over. He sees the female hawk who he's kind of been falling for the whole book. You know, at least his hawk side, and just wanting to be near it and possibly find a mate in it. And as he sees it, the Yeerks are still going crazy, and probably more crazed by the fact that, you know, the Andalite bandits are nearby. It's confirmed their ship is falling to the ground because of them. So they're still in kill everything mode. I'm sure they killed like 15 more deer, or at least cut them in half or something. And
eradicated all deer.
Yeah, or at least the hindquarters of all of them. Cassie was super sad, but he sees his possible mate, this hawk who he saved at the beginning of the book, and in true Yeerk fashion, and I would say in true Applegate fashion, his hopes, our dreams, are blown out of the sky by a Dracon beam, and just it's slaughtered, absolutely slaughtered. I'm not even sure I get the meaning behind doing this from a writing perspective. I think Kay Applegate just doesn't want us to be happy.
No, I think it's very very symbolic, I guess, because this Lady Hawk kind of represented, you know, Tobias's animal side and his freedom, I guess, and just seeing that, you know, the Yeerks blow up everything. They take everything away from everyone. It's just, you know, it's that one last little nail in the coffin here.
Yeah, but don't you think it takes away from his growth in this book?
No, not at all. It definitely had to happen.
Don't you think it takes away at all from his character growth in this book? The fact that it wasn't him putting the hawk aside. It wasn't him being tempted by this life with this female hawk and him turning away from it and embracing his human side. It was he had no choice. She was disintegrated.
No, not really. I like that this random animal died. I think it was a good little wake-up call for Tobias, and it just kind of eliminated that entire option for him of, like, thinking that he could retreat to this safe hawk life and, you know, kind of have this mate to be with or anything like that. And it was just a nice dose of reality in this sci-fi alien series.
Thinking about this, getting in depth, and I'm going to try not to go too far into this because that would be insanely spoilerish. But you could say that there's a path here that he chooses not to go down, and it's reflected. This choice is reflected throughout the rest of the series, in that he could have gone there. He could have gone and lived and embraced his hawk side and lived with this female. But I would say that he chooses the other female. He chooses his humanity side and who his human side wants to be with. And
Marco.
yeah, exactly. And this kind of mirrors towards the end of the series certain events. So
when he's dating Marco.
Yeah, and Marco gets Dracon beamed in the face. No, but I'll leave it at that. I don't want to be too spoilerish for all those new Animorphs readers out there who are listening to the Animorphs podcast. I don't want to ruin it for you.
Well, you know, you and I are at least partially in that category.
Yeah, somewhat, I guess, a little bit. But anyway, so all of this, the death of the mate, or the possible mate, this is the topic of choice for the third and final visit to Rachel here at the end, the last scene in the book.
Yeah, we get a little bit of a wrap-up from Tobias's perspective. It's basically just him explaining that, you know, the truck ship is destroyed / kind of removed by the Yeerks to cover their tracks. I don't know how every single media outlet in the world managed to miss this gigundo aircraft carrier-sized spaceship crashing into a...
This is the 90s. They were watching the, you know, Summer Olympics and the Bill Clinton scandal. So they were pretty busy.
Here's the reason why I like this female hawk dying. It's because when Tobias goes back to see Rachel here in the end, she's still trying to be very sensitive to him, and she understands what this hawk means to him and what she represented to him. So she, does the human thing and offers her and Cassie and maybe probably Jake had talked about it, and they were willing to help Tobias out by maybe going back up to the mountain and looking for this hawk's body to give it a proper burial. And Tobias he turns her down and basically states that's not really necessary. For one thing, her little hawk body has probably been torn apart by all the wild predators that are already out there, and he realizes that that's a very human thing to do, and it's not necessary.
Yeah, so he embraces humanity. And going forward in the series, he's still Tobias, the red-tailed hawk, but he is more so a real part of the team and a fighter for humanity. And it's because he knows who he is and he knows where he stands. So it's a great little ending right there. Great. I love any book that ends in a conversation instead of some big fight.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what we really get here at the end is Tobias completely coming into his position and his situation and learning to be okay with it. He's gonna be more hawk-like now because he has to, and he mainly just doesn't want people to feel sorry for his situation anymore.
Yeah, so that's a good point. That's the end of book 3, The Encounter. Great book. I think we both agree that we really enjoy it. But let's move into our individual reviews, where we take a moment, tell our thoughts, our critiques of the books, and give it a score out of 5 and see where it stands up against the books we've read so far. So you want to lead us off with that?
As always, I got to start us out.
Well, you should talk more at the end of the episode. Maybe you could switch it around.
Nonsense. Are you kidding me? Well, I don't have a whole lot of bad things to say about this book. It wrapped up every question I had about, how this one character who's trapped in the body of a bird is going to play out for the rest of the series. And it answered pretty much every question about Tobias that it needed to, at least at this point anyway. And any book that's daring enough to be published by Scholastic and put into elementary schools that depicts a child deciding on suicide, that's some heavy subject material, and I think this book does it very well. As far as the actual plot goes, there's some meandering there. He goes to see Rachel quite a bit, but I guess that's all part of the character development between the two of them, which is kind of necessary. Yeah, for this being an Animorphs book, the whole concept of morphing into an animal is pretty central to the series, and I think for having the only character who can't morph at this point, it still managed to put Tobias in enough of the action to where it's you don't feel like you're missing out on any good morphing action, since he's observing everybody else doing it, and it's just an interesting perspective that I don't think we get through any of the other characters.
All right, so what's your score? What are you giving this? Final say.
I really, really enjoyed it. I think I would give it maybe a lower score if I had more, constructive criticisms of it and bad things to say about it. But really, I don't have anything bad to say. I mean, I enjoyed the crap out of the book as I was reading it, didn't want to put it down. And to me, that gives it a definite high rating of a 5 out of 5 possible Sears.
Wow, yeah, 5 out of 5. I actually, I knew you were coming close to that score, but yeah, I get why you did it. It's a great book. And from my perspective, I love the Tobias stuff in this book. I think it's great. I think we needed an entire book from his, like you said, his perspective, this person who can't morph. And we needed to have his tragedy, him getting stuck in this hawk morph, we need it to be real. We need to connect a face to it, because otherwise I think it'd be incredibly easy for Tobias to fall off as a side character or as their scout or whatever. But by having this whole book focused on him and having him anchored to a character like Rachel, who I think a lot of fans this early on in the series kind of get on board with, because she's the Xena warrior princess of the series, by having him connected to her through relationship or just their friendship or whatever, it makes Tobias more likable. It makes him more grounded and allows an entire book to be around him. So everything with the depression and the suicidal tendencies, excellent. It reaches easily with the best stuff in the entire series, is this book. It's not like The Visitor last time. I had a lot of problems with The Visitor. This, I have barely any problems with. I would say the only things that really kind of irked me were the fact that with the stealth ship and with the Rachel visits, we kind of get into this pattern of repetition. It's not too bad, but we do keep coming back to these same set pieces over and over again, with the controllers taking over the woods, and these are split up by these great Tobias moments and him saving the human and all these other points. But I do think the main plot of them taking out this carrier isn't all it could have been. And the lead up to that and Jake's plan and all that and them talking about it works really well. But I think the actual action scenes and how it goes down just wasn't as interesting for me. But overall, still a really, really great book. One of the best in the series. I don't think as a new reader or as an old reader you can skip it. It's essential. For my rating, I'm going to go ahead and give it 4 out of 5 half deer carcasses. I think it deserved it. I think it's, like I said, one of the best in the series. And a 4 out of 5...
I think it deserves all the half deer carcasses.
I think it deserves almost a full deer, but we're not there yet. The Yerks won't allow it. But
only 5 halves.
Yeah, but it definitely stands high.
It flies high, you might even say.
Yeah. So okay. So that's our review of The Encounter. Now, real quick, I'd like to recognize an email that we got specifically about this book. And if you want to email us at thoughtspeakcast@gmail.com, you can get your emails read on the air as well.
I'm going to email you.
Yeah, we want our audience to participate and tell us their thoughts on upcoming books. So this is from Joe Fedowa. He writes in saying, "Hey guys, love the show!" ! He really likes the show. I thought I would break the seal on email comments. I remember book 3 and most Tobias books being very good. Getting inside the head of someone who is stuck as a hawk was very interesting. The other thing I remember most from this book is the crazy way it starts. Seems like K.A. liked to start these books with YOLO moments. Keep up the good work on a great show. P.S. If you guys are looking for any Animorphs gear, I have a store. All of the designs are made by me. Check it out! ! And the link to that I'll put in the show notes, but it's escafilshop.spreadshirt.com, and it's got a couple of really cool shirts on there.
I think I checked it out, yeah, and there are some cool ones.
Yeah, particularly there was one I saw that was it was like "Welcome to the Sharing" or something. That was pretty awesome. So
I saw a shirt design. I'm not sure if it's on that gentleman's particular store, but there was a shirt design for it had a. This is a reference to a later book, by the way, but it had an outline of a dolphin with Tobias the Hawk riding on top of it, and the caption read, "Dolphin Rodeo. It's got potential," which is a quote that a lot of fans love quoting over and over again.
Yeah.
It's one of the more humorous moments.
Yeah. So, well, yeah, that is our 3rd episode. I think we're wrapped up. I don't think we can squeeze anything more out about this book if we wanted to.
I concur. Book 3 in the can. I loved it. And you know what? I can't wait for book 4.
Thanks for listening to Thoughtspeak. Wanted to let everybody know that next week we probably won't be airing an episode. Mitch here decided to get married and ruin our podcast. So, yes.
My bad.
Yeah, so he's getting married next weekend, and I'm flying up to Minnesota to fulfill my best man duties. And yeah, I just don't think we'll be able to put out an episode. But the week after, look forward to an extra long episode. If you enjoyed this episode, you can follow the show by liking our Facebook or following us on Twitter @Morphcast. You can send us your questions or comments, as I said, by emailing thoughtspeakcast@gmail.com. Rate the show on iTunes and Stitcher so more people can find out about it and join the conversation. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. I'm Coleman.
And I'm Mitchell, and oh man, next time, our first Cassie book.
Oh, I don't know. We might skip the message.